All right, we are going to start trigonometry today. So this is all chapter 8 is trig. All right, so you'll see me refer to it as trig and chapter T rather than chapter 8 or unit 8. So you'll see that information as we go in the folders named accordingly. For this, remember, I kind of mentioned that you should probably have a calculator that's better than a cell phone calculator for this. And we'll get into a little bit how to do that tomorrow. So the first thing I want to focus on is some vocabulary. So it's important when we're doing this that trig is always going to be using a right angle. So we're going to want to make sure that we have a right triangle. Then there's also going to be an angle that we care about. And so based on that angle, that's going to tell us a lot of information. So first of all, the hypotenuse is always going to be across from the right angle. That we know. And the opposite side is always going to be across from the angle we care about. So if that's the angle we care about, then that's the opposite. And then our adjacent side will always be the side that is next to the angle we care about. So today we're going to really focus on labeling that triangle with our opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. We're also going to focus on SOHCAHTOA. And honestly, this is pretty much everything you need to know about trigonometry in that acronym. So SOHCAHTOA. And we'll talk about that on the back page. All right, so for these 8 triangles, we're going to label them as hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. So for example, this first one, right, we're going to notice that the right angle is right there. So therefore, this has to be my hypotenuse. The angle we care about is right there. So then this is going to be the opposite. And the side that is adjacent to that angle is my adjacent. All right, go ahead and pause the video and attempt the other 7 and see how you did. All right, there we go. Go ahead and look through them and see if you have any questions. Once again, it's super important that you pay attention to where is that angle that we care about. Because that angle could be either of the 2 angles that are not the right angle. Alright, so then we're going to get into SOHCAHTOA now and do some trig on the back. So for this, it's important that we remember that we have this acronym, so SOHCAHTOA. So sine is always going to be a ratio or a fraction, and that's going to be what my opposite is over my hypotenuse. Cosine is always going to be adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is always going to be the opposite over the adjacent. So let's take a look at that. Once again, I am going to write SOHCAHTOA up here, just so we have it as a reference. All right. So, question 9 says give each answer in terms of a fraction, and this is going to be the sine of angle A. So that means this is the angle I care about. So then I'm going to label my triangle. So this will be my hypotenuse, this will be my opposite, and this will be my adjacent. And then I'm going to come up with the fractions for the sine of A. I'll start with that. So remember, sine is going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So I can see opposite and hypotenuse. So the sine of angle A is going to be 5 over 13. The cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that will be 12 over 13. And the tangent of angle A is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. So 5 over 12. There we go. So that is just what we are doing for these problems. So we're just trying to figure out what is the trig for these. So for the next one, notice it's the same exact triangle, but this time we want to figure out what this stuff is in terms of B. So angle B is the angle I care about. So you'll notice that the hypotenuse is never going to change. So the side that's 13 is still going to be the hypotenuse, but now my opposite side becomes the 12 and my adjacent side is the 5. So it really depends upon the angle that we care about here. But the nice thing about trig is that that doesn't change. So for sine, I would still want the O over the H. So it'll be 12 over 13. Cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So 5 over 13. And tangent is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. So 12 over 5. You do want to make sure that you reduce the fractions, but otherwise you can leave them as improper fractions. So 12 over 5 is just fine. All right, on question 11, same exact thing. Clearly the angle we care about now, by looking at the question, is angle P. So I'm going to label my triangle accordingly. Once again, I highly recommend that you're labeling your triangle every single time. It's going to be a very good strategy that helps you be successful. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And I don't know numbers here, but I just know letters. So we'll just do P over R, which is fine. And see if you can finish out 11 and 12 here. Pause video, come back when you're ready. All right, so cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that'll be Q over R. And tangent is going to be the opposite over the adjacent, so P over Q. Lastly, we want to do the same thing, but we want to talk about angle Q this time. So my hypotenuse is going to stay the same, but then the opposite and the adjacent flip. So my sine this time is going to be Q over R. My cosine will be P over R. And my tangent will be Q over P. All right, so that is the very, very basics about trigonometry. You want to make sure that you're good at that. So good at labeling your triangle, and then good at being able to set up and remembering that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So once again, we're going to get into a lot more with the next section, and we're going to have to use that calculator to help us get the answer for those. So keep that in mind heading into tomorrow.